Hello, Denise Ramon. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Fine. I am so excited. Before we're going to talk about elder abuse. I love you, Eric, and
He,
VA abuse.
he says, "Hi, Mama." He said, "I love you." He says, and he's going. He says, "This is going to be really good today." He says,
Yeah,
he says, "This is a hot topic." He says,
it should be. If it's not, it should be. And I think it's just the lowest of the low that abuse the elderly in in nursing homes, at home by caregivers that are hired to take care of them in their homes,
mm-hmm.
and I guess you know, well, of course, the VA, in hospitals. It's just, I don't know, Eric. What do you have to say to that? Why is that a spiritual contract, or what's going on?
I asked him about that before we started. I asked him if it was a spiritual contract, and he says, some of it is, but not all of it is. It's not like they came here and this is what was supposed to happen. He says, but even though it is happening, it's not all good as in, oh, that's so good or whatever. It's still sad, but there's good to come from it because it's been going on. He says, long before we even really talked about it on the media and stuff, this has been going on for a long time. And
Yeah.
he said, so, in that aspect, it's good because now it's finally coming to the surface and people are starting to talk about it more. And he says here in the US, we have laws on the books about elder abuse.
Well, when
And
did it really start? I mean, see, here's the problem. A lot of elderly people can't talk. Maybe they have aphasia from a stroke, or maybe they have dementia, etc. So they can't point a finger at their abuser. So it can just go on and on and on until somehow there signs, bruises, etc. But then old people's skin is so easy to bruise. That's all sailor. This is all sailor. Ugh. So when did it really start to snowball? Not just in the media, but actually.
well, Erik says one is there's he says it really comes back to having, like, it's almost like you have an old product, like an old pair of shoes, and you don't like them anymore, and you're too lazy to go send them into the trash to recycle them, send them to a thrift store or something like that. So they just get kicked in the corner, he tells me, and forgotten about. And then every now and then you pull things back in the closet and you go, oh, there it is. And then you kind of move them around and put it back. And he goes, and that's what happens with the elderly. People kind of toss them to the side, the respect. He goes, and in a lot of other countries other than the US, elders are ranked real high.
Weird, yes, because they have so much wisdom and
Yes,
experience, and they've made so many more mistakes than the younger people have that we could learn from, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But of course, if they're
correct.
demented, and or for some of the reason they can't share that wisdom, it becomes problematic. But nonetheless, they should still be revered. So yeah. So when did it all start? Like really, especially in the West, just in the 80s, the 90s, the 50s, the
Erik said it really, well, it's been going on for a while, but it's been mainly, I guess he said, um, he's showing me like the 50s, because he's showing me that's when
oh,
nursing homes started to get, they started to pop up, like, oh, look, we have nursing homes. He goes, it's kind of like now, we have places for Alzheimer's,
yeah.
that we didn't have. And now that's starting. So they just have, he said, so that's when it started. And really started to become more, because then people could put their parents there and then forget about it because it's kind of like a daycare, but yet
Yeah.
they have their meals and the people forget about them. They get caught up, and it's like weight is lifted off of them. He's
Yeah.
telling me, instead of providing a bereavement care, like maybe it's a place where they go stay for a little bit, but then they have adequate facilities at home to where their parent or grandparent or whoever it is. And sometimes it's not even parents, it's an aunt or an uncle or a sibling who had mental capacities or whatever don't warrant living at home. So they put them in a nursing home because basically that's the cheapest place to put them when you're on Medicaid. And so he says there should be something that brings relief to the family so that they know, oh, okay, I just have this and someone else is going to help me with some of the care or whatever. He says, but we don't have that. So what we do is we provided a place, he says, like a dumping ground. And a lot of these people, the parents, the adults that are in there, don't have family members that really care.
Oh.
So they, and the people, the staff there knows that, he says.
Oh.
So then they came in and he said, then they came in later down the road and said, okay, and I have to kind of laugh at this because he said, now they're going to make it better where you have to be a certified nurse's aide. And I'm going to tell you, that was my first job. I was a nurse's aide. I was 15
That
years.
was Michelle's.
Yeah, I was a nurse's aide. And the reason why I got the job was because my friend's mother spoke up for me because my dad was in the military and the head nurse was in military. And so they hired me, gave me 90 days. And I ended up being the best nurse's aide ever.
Oh, of course you did.
I did.
I bet you were really good. And
I was. But he says that now you have to get certified, but they're still underpaid.
That's what I was gonna say. They're so underpaid, and I bet you anything there's maybe not even just subconscious, but conscious resentment that I had to wipe your ass for X dollars an hour. Are you kidding me? And they probably take their anger out on, the weak gazelle in the herd.
Well, Erik says he wants to say that there are a lot of good workers within these facilities.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of not good ones. And
Mandy, over where my mom was, you're the best. Yes, that's
so
true.
he says, but you get people in there that are there because there's no other job for them.
Yeah.
And they also don't pay them. So you bring people in, not all he's saying, but you bring people in who have no self-worth within their own self. So you can't give what you don't have, he says.
Ooh.
And he's right. They're saying, I don't want to, they feel that it's not their job to clean them up and everything. And it is. And as he's saying that, I remember thinking, I couldn't stand sitting in that for that long. So that's why I was always cleaning up and everything. And they can't help it. And Erik says, some of this stuff is, we ought to get an eye opener for some of this stuff, because some of these people in there are in there because their health was never provided for in a correct way. In other words, like some of these people are in there not because of their own doings, but yet not because of their own doings, because they were fed unhealthy things into their body that led to other things.
Yeah.
That to where they weren't kind of conscious and they fell, broke their hip, and and he says that a lot of them don't ever come back from breaking a hip when they're
very common. It's a really high mortality rate for older people.
Yeah. So he says,
true.
But the main thing is, he says, is there needs to be stricter, very strict regulations that come in that to where, he says, for one, he goes, it's like the people that go in there and check on this, it's kind of like CPS workers, they're overworked.
Oh yeah.
He says there's not enough to go around, and they should, he says, definitely they should be held to a higher standard, but there's not enough, I don't know, what would you
maybe
call police to watch it.
Well, I'm sure there's oversight boards and stuff, but maybe we ought to stop giving so much money to pet pork projects and give more to Medicaid and Medicare so they can pay these nurses aides and hire more and pay them a decent salary. I mean, these are this beautiful generation that took care of us, and they shepherded our ass into the new era. Okay. So it's not fair. I got to think about it. But also there's neglect. Even my doctors. I remember I just graduated from my internal medicine residency. And the first couple of days, I got a call from a nursing home saying, but the family doesn't want the medical director at this place. They want somebody else. So do you want to take care of this guy? GH, his initials. I said, sure. So I said, I'll go in and see him in the morning. And so I got a call that night. Do you still want us to give GH his temperature? I mean, his Tylenol for 104 fever? How long has he been having that? Oh, off and on for months. I go, you gotta be kidding me. The doctor never said anything. So anyway, I went and worked him up. Actually, I took him to my clinic. I was working at my parents' clinic. And I did a full workup. I did a lumbar puncture. And he had acid fast bacillus in his spinal fluid, which is TB, in the spinal fluid, in the brain. And he was a really super wealthy geologist guy, sharp as a tack, did his own taxes, and then got TB. But, it's neglect. I treated him. He got out of the nursing home and he was completely back to his former self, within just a few weeks. So neglect. It's not just beating.
No, it's neglect.
That too. That I don't know what's worse.
Erik says, well, when you're getting the beatings and stuff like that, that's worse. But when you're getting the neglect and not the beatings, then neglect is worse. He said they're equally horrible. Yeah. Of course, he says when you're getting one, you go, oh, well, that's bad, he's saying. But he says they're equally bad. And the neglect, he says, it's almost like he says, it's like the people who, not all he's saying, but a good portion of people that are in this, and I feel like he's talking about the nurses and some of the doctors, because, once you say you accept Medicaid or Medicare here in the US, you can't say, well, I'm only going to see this many people. You got to, you can't say, you don't have a choice. It's like if you're open for Medicaid, then you're open.
Yeah.
Of course, you can say no new patients or something, but you have to see those to the end, because Medicare and Medicaid doesn't stop like Cigna, like, okay, they don't sign that doctor on or something. I'm not picking on an insurance. That's the only thing Erik brought to my mind.
Okay.
But he says, but with Medicaid and Medicare, doctors accept that because it's a guarantee payment, provided that everything is filled out correctly.
Is
so
that
they
right?
know.
Maybe they're like old people.
For some, yes.
Yeah.
Now there are some doctors that prefer geriatric. That prefer that. That is their passion and everything. Like some doctors prefer, he says, pediatrics. But what happens is you get overloaded. And then he says, it's like you're trying to catch up and you just go, okay. And then you have nurses in there that, not all nurses, but there's just so much. It's like they got 300 people in a building.
Ugh.
And then there's one nurse for 30 patients.
There should be limits to how much a nurse can take care of, and nurses' aides too.
Yeah, Erik says there is, but they go over that, because what happens when somebody calls in, somebody doesn't show up. He says, so there's always that. He says they do have a limit how many they can care. But he says the whole thing needs to be revamped.
I know. Well, we'll talk about solutions, but I was also thinking about neglect. I think a lot of people taking care of these, whether it's in the home or the own family members, okay, whatever, taking care of these elderly people and veterans. I'm wondering if they're not conscious, and I didn't even realize whether I'm there or not. They don't even remember my name, so I can skate. I think a lot of that goes on, and when they're being beaten, they probably think, she's going to forget about it in 1 minute. So there's probably a lot of that.
Erik says there is, and he says, and this just goes in to show you where the person that's caring for him, and he's talking about in-home care,
Yes.
where they are,
Yeah.
how there's not wellness within them, so that person needs to be treated as well.
Yeah. And that's not policed. Well,
No,
unless
no. And
yeah.
Erik says that's hard to be policed because you can look really fine on the outside and be totally crazy on the inside. And when he says that, he's talking about being abusive, not feeding them, just giving them box macaroni and cheese and
Oh,
not brushing their teeth or cleaning their teeth or giving them a bath when they're supposed to, and just telling them screaming. He says a lot of screaming and yelling goes on because
I know.
he showed me because sometimes they don't hear well, so just a lot of screaming and that.
Mm.
And he says that they shouldn't even be caring for them.
Right. Well, there are techniques to handle, this problems with the senses that disorient. Like if somebody has a big cataract on one side, you always put them in the bed where the eye that can see, faces the door. I mean, there's all sorts of little tips and techniques that they should know about. But then, of course, um, and yeah, the screaming can drive people crazy. But sometimes they're screaming for a reason. But of course, there's the other side of it. I have found, as a general rule, that elderly people are either super sweet or they are so bitter and mean and abusive. I mean, emotionally abusive to people.
Mhm.
So, that's something you have to consider. It does not give people a right to abuse them, obviously, but it makes it a bit more challenging.
It does. And when you say that, I remember when I was a nurse's aide. And I know I was 15 then because I remember that they didn't move me to the other side until I turned 16. And
Yeah.
there was a man that was abusive and, obviously looking back, he probably had dementia that, but Erik's telling me he also had a lot of fear in him.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what he's telling me. So they lash out that way and you don't come back with the same behavior.
Yeah.
And you just talk to them short sentences, almost like you would a kid, short sentences and very clear.
Yes.
And whatever they're saying, you just respond back as to whatever it is. Okay, Mr. Smith, you're going to have to lay back down. And then they go on, and you just, Mr. Smith, you're sitting up, lay down, and just keep going. He says you have to come in that way, not get caught up in their energy. He goes, there's a lot of fear going on. And he says, even the ones who we think that don't know what's going on and they're abusive, rather verbally or physically, or they want to hit you with it, that's a lot of fear in them
Yes, of course.
that's acting out. And he says, and some of them, even though they're not all there, it's almost like this was their worst nightmare, was to end up in a nursing home.
Yeah.
And but he says now a lot of them are heavily medicated.
Yes. His
And,
he falls is terrible.
mhm.
But that's for the convenience of the staff, I'm sure.
Erik says some of it is, but then again, some of it's more for protection.
Yeah. A lot of
Because
times you don't want them
because
wandering around and
because
yeah.
he said sometimes they can be very strong. He's telling me.
Yes.
So especially the ones that have a lot of anger.
Yeah.
Um, and he says, it's the real solution. And he says one of them is what's making us get to that place where we have to be put in a nursing home. He says we should never have to go to one. We ought to never have Alzheimer or dementia or anything like that put us in there.
That's
And
right.
he says, Mama, your work could help with a lot of that.
Maybe I'll figure it out and cool myself. But I remember one guy was having a temper tantrum. His elderly guy. He was frail, but he was strong. He was pinching me and all that stuff. And I was like, I couldn't say anything. All I did was grab him and say and hug him and said, Mr. So and so, you just don't know what to do you? And he started sobbing, and he just didn't know how to handle himself. It was
Yeah. And,
sad.
he says, what works for one probably won't work for the other. But he says the main
Yeah.
thing is he says you have to remember they're in a place that's not familiar to them.
Yeah.
And he says it brings up a lot of fear. And it doesn't matter if they've been there 2 years, 5 years, 6 years, or 10 years, because the majority of them are remembering where they were.
Yeah.
And he says, and some of these people are grieving their spouses and don't know how to verbalize it.
Oh my goodness, that's right. And some of them have lived with the same person in the same house for, 60 years, and they're snatched away from that place of comfort. And a lot of times years have passed. And so there's plenty of time for weird little things to happen, like estrangement of that family member, estrangement of that family member. So this dysfunctionality also affects their care as well, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, Erik also says, he's saying another abuse is other patients abusing patients.
Oh, yes. I've heard that
And-
some of them have sex with the other, rape them and all sorts of
yes,
stuff.
yes. And he says that's because they're sticking people in there who are not really elderly, but they're sticking them in there because there's no other place to put them.
Oh, wow.
Because financially, they have no other place, like a group home won't take them because of certain situations. So what they do is they put people who are mentally ill in these nursing homes.
Well, that's another thing in these mental institutions. I'm sure there's a lot of staff on patient abuse and patient on patient abuse, pretty much mirroring the same thing we've been talking about. And the same in the VA. These are people who fought for our freedoms, and yet they also are, I'm not saying they're better than the others, but that's something we have to remember. So in state schools where people, they don't want to take care of their developmentally challenged child who, has the IQ of a 1-year-old or whatever, and is disabled and deaf and blind. They just stick them in a state school. And I'm sure they also get, the same thing happens, right? I mean, it's,
Erik says, yes, you don't hear.
Pick on the people pick on the weakest, the children, the elderly, the mentally ill. That's awful.
Yes. Erik says now, he says, if you would pay these people a decent salary, and he's showing me, so let's just say, and I don't know how much they get paid, but he says, let's just say the nurses that work in those places, let's say they make 50, 60, let's just say they make $60,000 to make it easy on me. And he says,
Probably not that high.
and the nurses aides, the CNAs, say they make,
see, I thought you were talking about that. Okay, got it.
okay, the CNAs, let's say they make $15 an hour. He said, bump up the nurses to like $80,000.
Yes.
And he's talking about, he's doing this. So I don't think he means like California, Hawaii, and Alaska, and New York, and that, because he's showing me like just in the middle of the US. He's showing
yeah.
me
Everything. Yeah, exactly. Everything's good. Every state would be different.
But he's saying, and then you up the nurses' age to where they make $25 to $30 an hour.
Yes.
You're going to get some people who are wanting to do this work and
it has to
wanting
be
to do
related to performance too.
Yes. He
How
says,
many compliments you get from family members or lucid elderly folks.
well, he says this is going to, he says it's not going to eliminate the problem, but he says, and this is me because of my limited vocabulary, you're going to get a different clientele applying for these positions.
Yes.
When you have a pay scale up here.
Yeah.
Instead of down here. And then also you're paying people more, and so that they know that they're worth more.
Yeah.
And
treat them better.
Yes.
Better. Treat them better.
Which trickles down to the patients.
Yes.
And he says, and then there also needs to be some form of mandated counseling or some type of work for these men and women who come in here, because some of them that are in the VA hospital suffer tremendously from PTSD, and
Yeah.
that does not get treated. It gets treated with drugs, and they're also self-medicating. So he says you have to work on all those levels, he's telling me. And he says, and I also feel like there's not enough doctors, is what he's showing me.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. I always loved taking care of nursing home patients. I remember, I love this guy, HB Parks. He's long dead, so there was no HIPAA laws then. I loved him so much. He always invited us. I was very young, and he wanted to invite us over for barbecue. I was so busy I didn't have time, unfortunately. So he moved away. Then he came back with colon cancer. That's off. He stayed with me. I would have found it, but it was too late. It was everywhere. And I remember sort of helping him transition and so on. And it was very sad. And Rebecca, his wife of many years, was in a nursing home, terrible nursing home. And I took care of her there. And I had to tell her, I said, I'm sorry, baby, but HB's passed away. And she goes, what do you mean? Does Dr. I had a different name then, but I won't say it because I don't want people, Dr. Medhus know about that? And I said, yes, I am Dr. Medhus. Oh, and she started talking about the kids and HB and says, I sure am going to miss HB, I'd say. Why? What's the matter with him? It'd go on and on. Oh. But so ignorance is bliss. All right. Y'all
Yes.
do not stop this because I have something very important to announce at the end, but we're almost finished.
Okay.
So, and we also have problems of staff having sex with the elderly too. I mean, we talked about elderly on elderly, I mean, patient on patient, but in mental institutions, maybe in state schools,
Yeah.
group homes, all these collective collection of people.
Erik says cameras need to be put up all around. And when he was telling me that
That's a
before,
great idea.
he said there needs to be cameras in every room where it does like a 360 everywhere. And that needs to be like, there needs to be somebody mandating those cameras, what's going on in that room. Like he's showing me like have a room full of 12 people, and I mean, he could be over exaggerating, but where those 12 people are recycled out. So nobody gets real comfortable with like, oh, that always happens or whatever, but keep circulating it. So this way, he says, because these people know that they're being watched.
Good.
So this, and he says this has to, because we have cameras in daycares.
But I think all the mandates and all the pay and all that ought to be left up to a state level, because every state is different as far as the income.
Correct.
And so you also have people, staff that, at least there's been several cases in history, euthanizing the elderly, but they have probably good intentions in the harbor. So,
Erik said yes, but Erik also said, and he's not going to go into detail, but he's telling me there's been a few cases within the US, and he's making me feel like there's been one in Texas where the patient absolutely begged for it to be done.
Yeah.
Just absolutely begged.
Erik, what do you think about that? Is that okay?
Because why not?
Yeah. Well, with HB, he was in such pain, and I told the nurse, said, just give him whatever morphine he needs, whatever. Just keep giving it to it until he does not have pain. And I said, you got to understand that he could have a respiratory arrest and die. He's terminal, But we didn't put people in hospice that much then.
Well, Erik says these people are,
and he passed away very, very peacefully.
And Erik says with dignity at that.
Yes, exactly. Not screaming.
Yeah.
No.
But Erik also says, what's the difference with somebody doing that? He said, and then letting them prolonged because the end result is still the same. It's not like you're doing it to someone who's 16 or 50 or something. You can see that they're at their place, and he's letting me know like this has been done. Yeah.
Well,
He says,
partly is, I'm sorry, go ahead. I thought you were
no, Erik says it's fine. He says nothing wrong with it.
Well, I think part of the reason we are scared to do that or don't do it is because we fear death. So we project that on the other person. Plus, there's a lot of people who said, man, the longer I can keep that patient alive, the more money I'm going to make. There really is that, that thinking out there, unfortunately.
Well, and he said,
the one is to live longer and die more slowly.
Well, he said, and also too, Mama, he says, doctors are trained to preserve.
Yeah.
So some of that's in there also. And when he says that, I remember that with my own mother. The doctor wanted to do a surgery and do this. And I was like, before she's dying.
Ego. That's ego. That's
dying.
Preserve means preserve the well-being of the patient. And if that means going home, that means going home.
Yeah.
Stupid. Silly.
I declined it. I said, no, we were not doing it. But yeah.
What about spiritual contracts behind all this, Erik? Can you rattle off a few?
He said some of the spiritual contracts, and he said some of it is some of these people in these nursing homes and were pretty shitty, he said, in life.
Oh, yeah.
So and some of the stuff, it's like he says, they were so afraid of this happening to them, it's almost like they created that environment for themselves.
They asked for it, that kind of thing, huh?
Yeah, like they focused on what they didn't want the most, and they got it.
Okay, so do you think that they came incarnated with that plan to be mean and crappy to their family, so the family wound up not taking care of them?
Erik says not all, no. Okay. He says because it's all, we still have a choice when we're here.
Yeah.
To do something different. We don't have to be that way, but
well, what sort of things do we incarnate with these contracts that on either side, the abuser or the abused?
Erik says when you get two people who, the one that's in the nursing home that was not the nicest person and all this other stuff, and the one that had to get all of this, he says their contract was really to the abuser, let's label him or her as that, is teaching the abusee to dig in deeper and find their own inner source, their own self. And that's what the abusee is teaching the abuser to go to find this within, but they never make it. So, and that's part of what it is they're here to teach each other that. And it's almost like Erik says they're standing there and they're saying, okay, we're going to see who wins this one. And hopefully we both can win it. And if not, then this is what's going to happen. And they say, okay, well, we're going to be able to figure it out, but then they don't.
Yeah.
And so this was part of it. And he says some of it's also for us to say our system isn't working. We need to do something different because
as a collective.
Yes, as a collective, because nursing homes are expanding. They're not getting smaller. He says they have grown crazy. He says they're not just spreading out, they're growing up.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know that. We have one in Houston that's kind of tall. Wow.
But he says, but then it's like, so people here are saving money. So hopefully they have enough care.
Yeah.
Money for the care, to care for them. And Erik says, cameras, when you have in-home health care, people that are care.
Be nice to your family as you're growing older, or starting from when you start having family. Keep the family unit together. Be a loving paternal or maternal presence. Don't, try not to become a dysfunctional family where people are going to end up saying, I'm not going to wipe your ass at home. I'm going to put you on an ice floe like the Eskimos do. Bye, Mom. Mom. No, you have to be nice. It's nice to be nice. I think that's the motto of Tobago, but I'm not sure. And
Well,
yeah,
Eric's
plan financially. And this is easier said than done, but plan. And there's probably insurance for nursing home care too.
yeah, but it's not a lot. Eric says it takes a lot of money in there because
Yeah.
but Eric says though, he says then the people who don't want to care for their parents, which maybe they can't,
Maybe they
but
can't.
but to ask for help,
Yes.
to say, I can't do this,
Well,
or
that's
I don't
okay.
want to do this. This isn't what I wanted to do. Because he says there are parents, and I'm like, oh, God, you're talking about me, Eric, who are older parents. So when they're like 80 years old, they have kids that are like 30 and 40 years old and
Yeah.
still raising their families and
Yeah.
that. And then to care for that, the elderly, it's a lot.
I
But
don't have time for this shit. Literally. No,
yeah. But Eric says, for the kids or whoever to say, I can't do this. I need help.
so
I will come by
humility,
and
surrender.
visit.
Right.
Yeah, I'll come by and visit. And when he's telling me that, I remember when I worked in the nursing home, when they moved me to the section that was predominantly Medicaid, there was probably about 100 patients in there. And I tell you, maybe 20 of them had people that came to see them.
Oh no. Well, I wonder what percent, Eric, of those were because they were not very nice to their family when they were not in a nursing home. Can you give me a roundabout figure?
Eric says it's a small percentage. He says he'll be generous and go 30%. But they get busy with their life, they move away and stuff like that, and they it's kind of like, oh, they'll take care of them, and but there are some who whose kids, for whatever reason, but Eric says, but that still doesn't take away the subject of what we're talking about the abuse with the elderly and in the VA. And Eric says the VA has been an ongoing thing where it's kind of been hushed, but it's kind of seeping out. You can't keep it quiet anymore.
Well, it's a PTSD. They get angry. Maybe that's part of it.
Eric says that's a big part of it. And they really need, he says, is energy work done to them. That's what he said. They need energy work. He's saying this is what they need.
Well, that's for a frequency set and a script for PTSD. Oh.
Eric says they need that.
Collective. This VA hospital. I don't know. It'll take forever.
But no, Eric says, they need energy work done. He's even saying if they would have people come in and give them acupuncture and do forms of other different types of healings, he says it would make such a huge difference on them.
Oh gosh, we have a long way to go, don't we? So there's others, I guess, humility, like we talked about, and another contract, I guess, would be self-control. Control your impulses. Get angry at that person. You don't want to beat the crap out of them. Have some other calming being able to self-calm, self-soothe. I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of them, a lot of spiritual contracts that are valuable. But we need to look at those lessons, Well,
Eric says some of the spiritual contracts are, some of these kids were, some of these kids, I say kids because he shows me coming in as kids, they, the ones that end up in the nursing homes, he says, this, for them, they're at the mercy of a lot of people.
Oh, God.
But he says, you got to stop thinking, I hope I don't end up in a nursing home. I hope I don't end up in a nursing home. He says, we have to stop that thought process.
Yeah, because thought creates reality, people.
He says it does. And then for the family members who are causing or creating the abuse, he says, it doesn't just start with the parents. They're just not that mean to the parents, and that's it. That's not where the buck stops. He says there's a history with them too. So they could be some mean friends, mean, like you don't want them for friends, or they're mean to their own family members or whatever. But he says it's kind of like the dog. You can kick the dog because it's not going to come after you or tell anybody. And then, so yeah. But he says, but there's been cases where people have been videoed and
Good. That's a great idea to do that. That's probably going on already and hopefully getting more popular. What am I put down here? So, oh no, I already said that. So what do you, how do you, compared to an institution versus, visiting angels, da, 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 da. What do you think? In care home.
Erik says in-care home is good, but you
in-home care, sorry.
Yeah, in-home care. He says that's good. He knew what you meant. He says that's good, but you still have to have accountability there. And he's showing me, like with the cameras, the cameras are real important. That's just the way it is. He says, and cameras are not nearly as expensive as they say.
Oh gosh, no. Oh, they're very inexpensive. The Canary. There's a lot of really cheap ones now. Thank goodness. I guess another big spiritual contract would be about being selfless, like the people who just don't go and visit there, even though that person's been so kind, their parent has been so kind to them in their life. Oh, they can't, my life is important, blah, blah, blah. It's me, me, me. Maybe that's a lesson too. I can't be bothered. I'm too busy with more important things.
Erik says yes, and he says in something like that, they're playing out like a karmic plan. And when he's saying karmic, it's not like because you did something bad to me, now I'm going to do something bad to you. It's just kind of like, I guess, balancing out stuff. But it's almost like, okay, this is what happened to me in this lifetime. Now I get to be this person in this lifetime.
Just a balance.
Yeah, balance it out. And it's not that the one in the nursing home was so crappy to the one that's being crappy now, but maybe the one that's in the nursing home said, hey, I want to be this person for you so you can learn about self-love and whatever like that. And so they play that role. And Erik says he says you're going to ask, but do they learn that? And Erik says some do, some don't.
Sometimes it's kind of, given the nature of the whole thing, there's not that much time to learn those lessons.
Right. Erik, he was just talking to me because I had promised my mother I would never put her in a nursing home because I worked in one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we didn't. And when she was in hospice and the other half was a nursing home, I slept on a trifold cot in her room till the day she died. Wow. Because nobody loves your mother like you do.
What I did, I slept on the rug on the floor next to my mother.
But Erik says we all are accountable for this. Yeah. If we know it, see it, or hear it, we're accountable, regardless if we're the one that's doing the abuse or not. If we are in a nursing home, in a school, a group home, or the VA hospital, or any of those institutions, and we see abuse, we smell abuse or whatever, it is up to us to go and do something.
Exactly.
Because it gets seen by other people and they don't report it.
Oh, that's terrible. Why?
Yeah, because they're afraid.
Hassle. The paperwork is probably a lot of it's that.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible. Anyway, before we close, first of all, DeniseRamon.com, DENISE Ramon, RAMON.com. Of course, she's awesome. A healer, a channel, etc., etc. She does windows. There's that too, right? And she will wipe your ass for only $20 extra per reading. She's had plenty of practice.
Yep.
My Michelle told me, you know that I'm going to be the one that wipes your ass, Mom. But speech to text said likes your ass. I said, oh, you mean wipe? Oh, yes. Well, you got to like it too. It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do my old ass. All right. Well, I will talk to you later.
All right. Take care.
I love you, Eric. Love you, Denise.
Erik says, love you, Mama.
Bye.
Bye.